Welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast, empowering and inspiring your journey to optimal health. Hosted by Dr. Supatra Tovar, clinical psychologist, registered dietitian, fitness expert, and author of Deprogram Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship with food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. I follow my guests' journey to optimal health, providing you with the keys to unlock your own wellness path. Tune in and evolve with us. Welcome, everyone. I can't even believe my luck, but I am so honored and so fortunate to have world-renowned scientist and best-selling author, Dr. Satchin Panda, with us today. Dr. Panda, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Yes. So I just a background, I went to the American Psychiatric Association conference and I saw that Dr. Panda was speaking and I had to go see his talk. I have read the Circadian Code, which we'll talk about. And I just wanted to hear him in person. And then I just was brave and asked him to be on the podcast. And here you are. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on my podcast.
Thank you. Yeah,
So
you're
I'm
doing great in communicating science to general audience. We scientists are not very good in telling people what we do. So thank you for doing this.
Oh, absolutely. And you are very good. I saw you on the Huberman podcast and was joking with you before that you have amazing podcast stamina. This will not be as much of a marathon, but I hope to get as many questions in as possible. Before we do that, I'm going to read a little bit about Dr. Panda. So hang tight, Dr. Panda. Dr. Satchin Panda is a world-renowned scientist whose groundbreaking work in chronobiology has transformed our understanding of how the body's internal clocks govern health, weight, energy, and aging. As a professor at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies, Dr. Panda has dedicated his career to exploring the science of circadian rhythms and their profound effect on human physiology. His pioneering discovery of the blue light sensing protein melanopsin helped explain how light regulates the brain's master clock and has influenced global recommendations on sleep hygiene and screen use. I know I have changed my screen use based off of this research. Dr. Panda is also celebrated for his research on time restricted eating, showing that when we eat may be as important as why we eat. His work demonstrates that aligning meals, activity, and rest with the body's natural rhythms can reverse metabolic disease, enhance longevity, and restore vitality without requiring caloric restriction or extreme diets. That's what I'm all about, you guys. So this is so exciting to me. They're his best-selling book, The Circadian Code, and he has just recently written one, The Circadian Code. Is it diabetes
The
edition?
diabetes scored, yes.
The Diabetes Code. Dr. Panda has brought the science of biological timing to the public in an accessible and empowering way. With warmth, brilliance, and unwavering dedication, he continues to shape a new era of health rooted in the rhythms of nature. Dr. Panda, welcome.
Thank you.
I really love to explore people's inspiration on this podcast and what drew them to this research. So, what drew you to the study of biological clocks, and how did this early research lead to the insights that informed the circadian code books?
Yeah, that's a very loaded question. That goes back to 30 years or so. But, when I was finishing college and starting to think about what to do in life, I was drawn into biomedical research. But at the same time, I realized that in biomedical research, typically we compare the body to a machine or a car. And just like you can start the car or start a machine at any time of the day or night, it will still run the same. A body is not like that. If you ask me to do this podcast at 1 o'clock in night, then there is no way I'll be awake and talking to you. So
Mhm.
that struck me that our body is not the same between morning and evening, or when we go to bed, we go to bed in one state, very tired, and our brain is very confused and foggy, and we wake up very differently if you had a good night of sleep. So I
Mhm.
was drawn into this question. what happens to our body throughout 24 hours, and is there a reason behind it? And if so, then how can we leverage that to improve health, prevent disease, accelerate cure, or even find new medication that target this timing in biology?
So, give me a picture of how your research began. Like, what did you first start to look at? And then, how did you discover these light sensing protein, melanopsin, and tie that into circadian rhythms?
Yeah, so my undergraduate research was on undergraduate degrees in actually agriculture or plant biology. And most people may not know that plants also have a strong circadian clock. And those who have seen the video of a sunflower plant can appreciate it, like how the sunflower leaves wake up in the morning, harvest the light, and then the sunflower kind of tries to look at the sun, and then at night, the sunflower leaves actually droop down as if they're going to sleep.
Mhm.
So, and that process actually helps plants to harvest sunlight and increase the efficiency of carbon fixation of making food, making all the food that we eat ultimately comes from plants. And that increases, having a clock actually helps the plant to kind of open the shop before the sunlight comes in, and then they shut down the shop before sun sets. And my interest was how the plant has a clock. So I was working on a mutant plant that actually had a slightly longer clock. And the bottom line is, after I cloned this particular gene in the plant, realized that this quote unquote clock gene was actually tied to NAD metabolism. That means to energy balance in the cell. So that was a aha moment that, well, actually the biological timekeeping is really linked to how the plant is sensing energy, making energy, or storing energy, all of that. And as plants always have to sense light, I was also primed to the idea of how humans or mice sense light and reset our clock. And until that time, it was known that our usual rod and cones that we have in our eyes that give us vision so that we can navigate throughout day and night, those rod and cone cells are not necessary for resetting our clock. So that means there are many blind people who cannot see, but when they fly from west coast to east coast or vice versa, then they do get jet lag for the first 3 or 4 days, and then they can reset to the same time zone, just like rest of us. So that was like interesting that blind people can still reset their clock, and but there are some blind people who unfortunately have lost both their eyes because of surgery or accident. They cannot reset their clock. So that means the light going through the skin, because we always think that our skin can sense light, we get a tan, or vitamin D is produced in our skin in response to light. None of that process seems to be sufficient to reset our sleep wake cycle. So that's why I was curious, what is in that eye that is not rod and cone that resets our clock? So that led to the research. And this is where I must also emphasize how foundational research actually helps make big breakthrough. Like, for example, we often forget that research is not all about treating patients. Sometimes research to figure out, for example, how a frog senses light and darkens its skin, like how the frog gets a tan. That kind of research actually led to the discovery that frog skin actually has a protein called melanopsin. So the skin cells that are darker, those are called melanosomes because they are pigmented cells. And opsin typically refers to a light sensing protein. So that's how it was called, melanopsin. So it was not me, but some other people who were curious about how frog gets a suntan. They figured out that there is a light sensing protein called melanopsin. And this is one example of how foundational research funded by honest taxpayers actually leads to some discovery. And then another stream of foundational research that was trying to sequence the genome of humans so that we know what genes are. and also at the same time genomes of mice, flies, and all these organisms that was going on. And then we figured out that this gene that makes a frog get suntan is actually present in very few cells in human eye or mouse retina. And these few cells are not the ones that we use to see the world, but these cells were never known to have a light sensor. So this is an example of how very foundational research in two different, completely unrelated fields, genome or DNA sequencing, and how frogs change the skin color came together and we discovered that this gene is there. And then we said, okay, so let's figure out what this gene does. So another type of foundational research that started in 70s and 80s to figure out how to change a gene in a mouse or human, now what we call gene therapy. So in 2000, 2001, we kind of did a gene therapy in a reverse way. We said, okay, so let's take out this gene from mouse and then see whether the mouse gets jet lag or not. And then we found that the mouse was getting severe jet lag if they don't have this blue light sensing protein.
Oh,
So
poor
that's
little
how this
mouse.
came together.
That is an amazing interconnection of species and studies. I am so grateful to the sun tanning frog
You
and
know,
that little jet lagged mouse
yeah.
to bring us to circadian clocks. So, if you could explain to maybe our less science minded people exactly what is our circadian clock and why are they essential to everything from digestion, sleep, mood, weight, immunity? What is it about this clock that is so important?
Yeah, so we not only we humans, almost every living, moving animal, and also almost all plants on this planet have what we call a circadian clock. Circadian literally means 24 hours clock. And the reason is if you now go back to our ancestral living, for example, once I was in Africa and I realized the importance of a circadian clock because suppose say there is a overcast day, it's cloudy and all, and then you are hunting or gathering food outside, and it becomes late afternoon, and you're kind of a little bit hungry, and you want to come back home because being out there among lions in the evening is not the best thing for your survival. So
Mhm.
you'd run back to your hut, and actually, that's what literally happened to me because I was trying to get back to my campsite and I got lost. And I realized that, that primal fear came. Like, is there a lion in that bush is going to attack me? Because lions actually come back. They know that this is the time when animals and humans, not humans, animals get lost. And this is the time when they come to drink their last sip of water. So this is the time when to attack. So the idea is my circadian clock can sense that evening is about to happen and I have to go back home, eat something, and then go back to sleep is a very survival advantage. Forget about me. Suppose it was a deer or a little rabbit. All of them do it. So circadian clocks essentially let us anticipate time and then start to do something before that time arrives. For example, in this case, I anticipated when it's going to be dark and then I ran back. So similarly, what we have discovered is means when I say we, it's the entire field of circadian rhythm, hundreds of scientists over the last 20, 50 years, is we have a very intrinsic time counting mechanism that's built into our DNA, literally into our DNA. So that means if you now lock me inside this room without a watch, without a clock, without internet, without phone, and there is enough food here and a bed, then even without knowing what time it is, my body will feel sleepy around say 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening. I'll sleep for 8, 9 hours and then wake up even without any external cue of day night cycle. I'll wake up exactly after 8 hours or so. My body temperature will begin to rise. I'll have bowel movement mostly likely in the morning. My cortisol will peak, and then the, I'll feel like eating something, moving around throughout the day, and then in the evening again, this I'll go back to sleep, and it will continue to happen in this clockwork mechanism with like 5 or 10 minutes precision every single day. And in fact, these experiments were done long time ago, almost 60, 70 years ago. Some volunteers wanted to see whether there is a circadian clock. They actually went inside a cave, and then every time they went to bed, they had a homemade telephone. They would call outside saying, I'm going to bed. And then the outside person will write down what time it is. Or so they did that, sometimes in the cave, spending 60 days, 70 days without any contact with outside world, without any timing cue, and they figured out that these people are going to bed and waking up in roughly 24 hours every day. Actually, 24 hours, 5 minutes, or 24 hours, 10 minutes. So that led to the idea that we have an inbuilt timekeeping mechanism. Then the question is why?
Mm.
And the reason is, the broad reason is, our body cannot do everything at the same time. So, for example, you cannot eat and swim and read at the same time or sleep. So, what we call a body has figured out a way to do incompatible processes at different time of the day. So that's why we sleep. We don't have bowel movement in our sleep, or we don't have
Fingers
muscle.
crossed.
Yes. Or we don't feel super hungry. So we can go 7, 8 hours without feeling hungry at night time. But during daytime, even if you are just sitting in your chair, you'll feel hungry because of this, what we call temporal separation of incompatible processes. So that means the clocks help our body to do this differently. And then second thing is to do things that are similar. So for example, during daytime, we have much better muscle tone. We also feel hungry so that we can walk to the vending machine and get the food. Or,
Hopefully not the vending machine, Dr.
yeah. I mean, in nature, we have to go and find food and come back.
Nature's vending machine. I got it.
Yes, we have to work for it. Actually, you have to just press now home delivery. Now, so these compatible processes are together, incompatible processes are different. And then the third thing is, throughout the day, when we do certain tasks, our body actually goes through a lot of injuries. So, for example, our gut lining, nearly 7 to 10% of our gut lining gets injured, and our skin cells get injured. So, there are a lot of injuries that happen during the day. And if you imagine if there is a machine like that getting this much injuries, then you have to send that machine or your car to the body shop or to the repair shop to get it repaired. That's exactly happens to our body. We go to sleep and we're just not lying there. We're actually lying on the literally on the operation theater, or maybe if it is a car, then the car is lifted up and all the tune up is going on. That's exactly happens. Our lining of our intestine gets repaired, our skin gets repaired, and then our brain, the trash is literally taken out. And when we wake up, our body has gone through that overnight reset, rejuvenation, and repair. So the clock does all of this. We have an inbuilt program to do all of this. So similarly, when the repair is going on, you don't want to eat anything because it's almost like you cannot repair a road when the traffic is still flowing. So that's why the clock also shuts down our hunger center at night time so that we are less hungry so that the repair can go. So what we have found, what the field has found, is almost every single cell in our body, in every organ, has its own clock. Starting from our hair cells to our intestine, everything has a clock. So, for example, our hair also doesn't grow continuously. It grows only for a few hours every night, and then it pauses. These are actually during daytime. It kind of for humans, it's during daytime. So, there are all these processes built in to repair, reset, and rejuvenate our body every single day. And when we don't pay attention to this intrinsic mechanism to repair, then we fall sick. That's as simple as that.
Yes. And so and I was listening to you on the Huberman podcast talking about night owls versus, morning. What do they call them? Just morning people, I guess.
Right.
Um, and how there really is not necessarily any such thing as a night owl. Is
I
that
mean,
true? And if that's true, why then are there people out there who are saying, "Well, I'm just a night owl. I can't get up early in the morning," even though, from what I can tell from your research, our bodies are designed to wake with the morning sun and to start to get sleepy, around, like you said, 9 or 10 after the sun has gone down. How do you explain that?
yeah. So, for this kind of research, people have gone back to ancestral living when there is no light, no caffeine, no hot chocolate and beer and wine, all of that stuff. And you can do this experiment on yourself if you're a strong believer that you're an early bird or night owl, whatever it is. You go camping for 7 days or 8 days, and then whatever fits in your backpack and enough water, no caffeine, no tea, no hot chocolate, dark chocolate,
Well, you
or
can fit those into a backpack, and I did do that growing up in Colorado, but let's pretend we don't do that.
yeah, means people can take a lot of chocolate bar that you can fit, or caffeine powder, and then you put it into water. A lot of people do that. But suppose say you do this experiment, and in fact, somebody in Colorado did this experiment. Ken Wright, Professor Ken Wright, who is a professor there, he took his entire lab on camping trip, and these kids, they're college kids, and they strongly believe that they're night owl because they cannot go to bed before 1 o'clock in the morning. So they were very convinced that it is their genes that is making them to stay awake till 1 o'clock. And when they went on camping, they realized that without all the stimulants, without the bright light of the city, then they were all falling asleep around 9 or 10 at night. And then they said, well, let's come back again and do this experiment more carefully. So they even measured their nighttime melatonin rhythm and body temperature and all these very sophisticated measurement. And what they found was when these kids are in college and they are studying under bright light and have a lot of caffeine to keep them awake, then they go to sleep after 1 o'clock at night. But when you withdraw all of these and then put them back to ancestral living in campsite, even if they are not hiking day long, you might argue that, oh, well, they were tired, so that's why they fell asleep. No, it's not about that. Even their sleep hormone melatonin got reset and it began to rise, say 6 or 7 in the evening, so that after 3 or 4 hours they could fall asleep. So that was the kind of experiment that tell us that, if you ask people, almost half of the people on this planet will say either they are early bird or night owl. But if you go back and ask in very ancestral population or places where there is very little electricity, you don't see this 50% calling themselves night owl or early birds. It may be 1 in 200 or 1 in 300 who might have. So that raises another question. It may not be our clock is running differently, but some people may be more sensitive to light. Some people may be more sensitive to caffeine, so that even if they had just 1 cup of coffee in the morning, that would keep them awake till 1 o'clock at night. Whereas some other people may be much more resistant to caffeine or light. And irrespective of what happens, they will fall asleep at night, not 10 o'clock.
Mm.
So I think the take home message is it's may not be our clock is running differently, it's our habit. And these habits, we don't know whether we are more sensitive to caffeine, we are less sensitive to caffeine, or even recently there is a new study that came out studying thousands of people over several weeks, that those who exercise in the late afternoon or early evening, they're likely to fall asleep a little later because most likely that they have stress hormone that goes up. And when you exercise, your core body temperature also is going up. So that might delay people falling sleepy. So we have to think about all these habits. So the good thing is, if we think about the habits, then we can fix that. If you're a night
Mhm.
owl, then you can fix that. But if you think it's in your gene, then unfortunately we cannot fix that. We cannot make it. We cannot edit your gene that easily. Having said that, there are very few people who actually have genetic defect, who can have genetic defect, and usually it's not only that they fall asleep very easily in the evening, or they cannot sleep before 1 o'clock. They also have other health conditions. Some of them might have severe migraine pain. Some of them may have other conditions with their mental health. So most normal people, when they call themselves night owl or early bird, most likely it's their habit.
Wow. Okay. So, oh, I have so many questions and there's so little time. Give me a picture of what would be a perfect circadian rhythm for somebody. That means what optimizes, say, their physical health, their weight, mental health, just everything that they should do in a day when they should go to bed to like completely optimize their health. And then what happens when we're outside of all of those recommendations? She give us some
Yeah.
general health consequences when we don't follow that.
Yeah, so maybe I'll break it down to uh, what elements in our habit affects what part of the clock. So, for example, we started this discussion with this melanopsin, or the blue light sensing protein. So, this blue light sensing protein that's in our eye, that senses blue light, but it also needs much brighter light. So that means during daytime, when we're outdoor, the daylight is the richest source of blue light, because sunlight is strongly has very strong blue light component. And even if you're not exposed to sunlight, even under a canopy, under a tree, even inside your car, even if it's a cloudy day, there is enough blue light. And during daytime, having exposure to that blue light does various things. One is it resets our clock so that we are actually on the same circadian clock. So, for example, those who do night shift, day shift, or they have traveled from East Coast to West Coast, or one or two time zones, having exposure to that bright daylight actually helps to reset our clock,
Mhm.
our brain clock. Second thing is, the same light sensors actually connect to part of the brain that control our alertness or depression. So that means people who live in winter in Canada or northern countries, they know that in winter when they get less light, they get depressed. You don't have to live in Canada. Actually, you can live in sunny California or Texas and or Florida, but you're not. If you're not going outdoor, you're essentially mimicking as if you're living in Stockholm or Canada or Toronto in winter. So that means daylight, even for an hour, even if you are not in sun, just under a on a veranda or under a tree, that 1 hour of bright light is enough to uplift your mood and reduce the depression symptom.
Mhm.
So that's about light. Now we can connect that why this is important. And conversely, in the evening, if you have bright light, for example, if you walk into a grocery store or a drugstore these days, you have almost 1,000 lux of light. So that means that light is 1,000 times brighter than a candle. So that's the rough estimate. And at that light level, it will put a brake on your melatonin, so you cannot fall asleep easily. So that
Mhm.
means in the evening, we should avoid that light, and we should minimize our exposure to blue light. So that means you can have, orange color kind of that light in your bedroom. So now we can connect what light is good for you during day, what light is good for you at evening or night. Then we can come to food. So although our brain clock is very sensitive to light, we have clock in rest of our body, our digestive system, our heart, kidney.
Wait on the food. Let's do all we're going to spend the rest of the podcast, the second half, all on food. So just give a little snippet, a little teaser for everybody what recommendations you have on food, and then we're going to really dive into that in our second half.
Yeah. So the food is, Just like you should get light during the daytime, similarly, you should get food only for set number of hours. So that means if you give yourself somewhere between 8 to 10 hours when your body is enjoying food, then you will improve your health by letting the body to rest, regenerate, repair itself during the rest 16 to 14 to 16 hours of fasting. And
Okay.
that seems to be the biggest impact on circadian rhythm and health.
Yes. And if you don't, so many different types of difficulties can happen if your eating window, say, is anywhere outside of that kind of time restricted zone. That's when you start to see, especially people eating late at night, um, are a lot more prone to metabolic disorders, insulin resistance, things like that. It's a combination also of what we're eating. But the timing of our eating is really important. And we're going to dive into that like majorly in the second half of this podcast. Are there any other recommendations outside of light and food that people can take away in this half?
And then sleep, because when we sleep, our brain rewires itself, it cleanses itself, and also produces different types of hormones for different part of the night. So, for example, right after we sleep, we have a spike of growth hormone, and then our testosterone and cortisol, they all reach their trough level, and then they begin to rise. A lot of our hormones are kind of, you can say, are rebalanced at nighttime. And our brain also takes out its own trash. So that means our brain cleanses itself during our sleep. So when you sleep less, it's almost like you are stopping the washer and dryer and taking out dirty, half clean cloth, putting them into half dry condition. And maybe in the morning, you're putting some perfume, that's your caffeine to get out of the house.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I think that, and there's plenty of research to show that, when he's talking about the trash being taken out, it's those kind of tangled proteins and plaques from the brain that can contribute to dementia and Alzheimer are actually washed away during sleep. So when we don't sleep enough, we can be much more prone to those kinds of neurological disorders. Am I correct?
Yes.
Wow. There's 80,000 more questions. You just want to ask so many questions, but I also really want to get into time restricted eating and how some of those recommendations may have been skewed some in diet culture. And what do we do about that? So that's going to be in our second half of our podcast. But Dr. Penda, oh my goodness, you are an amazing wealth of information. And I'm so honored to have you on my podcast. You'll be joining me for the second half, of course.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes. All right, everyone. So thank you so much for joining us. Tune in next time for the second half of this interview with world-renowned scientist and best-selling author, Dr. Satchin Panda. Thanks for tuning into the ANEW Insight Podcast. Please remember, the contents shared on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. You can find us anywhere podcasts are streaming, on YouTube at my.anew.insight and at anew-insight.com under the ANEW Insight Podcast tab. And follow us on our socials at my.anew.insight on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads for more updates. Tune in next time and evolve with us.